on. And that's the big thing here. We can debate about war and foreign policy. These things aren't going anywhere. The problem is this is a total betrayal of Trump's base. This is exactly against everything he ran on. And the 1984 Orwellian nature of the Board of Peace launching war after war after war and sitting here screaming about how Iran is firing missiles all over the world while Israel is in a war with 7 separate countries at the same time. The irony and the hypocrisy should not be lost on your audience.
In this video, we are watching Donald Trump's own political base completely turn on him as his disastrous new war in Iran spirals out of control. For years, the right has masqueraded as the anti-war party, pretending that Trump was the ultimate peace candidate. But the moment the neocons got back into power, they plunged the world right back into a catastrophic, multi-trillion-dollar conflict. Now, former Trump staffers and right-wing commentators are melting down on live television, calling it a total betrayal. If you want to see the MAGA civil war erupt in real time, show your support by hitting like and subscribe. And don't forget to ring that notification bell so you never miss a video. Now, let's watch this together and then I'll give my 2 cents at the end.
Right now to try and impose their will on it, even if in a world where the United States retreated from the scene.
Okay, let's bring in the other two guests. Owen Shroyer, what do you say to Will's argument? Very bullish, thinks that this is ending quickly and it's going to be a massively big win for the United States and Israel.
Well, I think Will has his White House talking points down almost 100%. I'm not sure there was an original thought there. The one thing he missed was you're not supposed to call this a war, Will.
He read
Remember,
a book in the last
you're
decade.
not supposed to call it that. Here we go.
You insulted me. We can keep doing this all day.
I'd love to, Will. I also find it funny that he keeps saying Iran blackmail, another talking point that is coming from Western media, as if we didn't just see the Epstein list and all the connections to Israel revealed with that. He says Iran blackmail. As far as the conclusions that we're reaching here, I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure about these conclusions about the Gulf nation states. You know, when this thing first broke out, they said, oh, it'll be all the NATO countries and the EU countries and the Gulf nation states, everybody lining up against Iran. Well, it hasn't really been that smooth. It seems like a lot of them want to maintain good relations with the U.S., but they're not so sure about what's going on with this war. And, you know, you bring up what happened with Azerbaijan. They come out and say, okay, we're against Iran, and then they get hit with a bomb, and you don't even scratch your head for a second. You don't even think for 1 second that could be a false flag, as if these things don't happen in war.
Wrong.
So I think that there's a lot.
They came out and gave condolences for the death of Khamenei, and then got bombed.
Okay. Well, we'll see how this all turns out. I don't think it's going as smoothly as Will likes to represent. Like I said, I'm not sure there's an original thought there. This is the neocon. Will represents the neocon faction of right-wing politics that we thought we defeated in 2016. We thought we defeated again in 2024. This is the opposite of what Trump ran on. And that's the big thing here. We can debate about war and foreign policy. These things aren't going anywhere. The problem is this is a total betrayal of Trump's base. This is exactly against everything he ran on. And the 1984 Orwellian nature of the Board of Peace launching war after war after war and sitting here screaming about how Iran is firing missiles all over the world while Israel is in a war with 7 separate countries at the same time. The irony and the hypocrisy should not be lost on your audience, Piers.
Okay, let me bring in Caroline. You were a former Trump spokeswoman. Where does all this sit with Donald Trump's repeated mantra when he campaigned in the 2024 election of America first, no more interference in foreign wars, particularly in the Middle East, and now here America is in the biggest interference imaginable in the Middle East, taking on Iran in this full-blooded, full-throttle way. Where does that sit with how he campaigned?
Yeah, Piers, first and foremost, I love the American military. I love our troops, just like millions of Americans do. And that's why we were so excited when a candidate like Donald Trump came on the scene and talked about no more involvement in the Middle East and no new wars. And I would go on TV and say that on behalf of the president during the 2024 campaign. And I was proud to do it. I was enthusiastic to do it. It wasn't just that President Trump was talking about that, no more involvement in the Middle East, criticisms of our past involvement in the Middle East were extremely valid, an indictment of the neocon political class establishment and their record in the Middle East. It was the passion with which he talked about it. You can go back to 2016 and you can see the fire in him, the passion that he was talking about it with. it really electrified people and moved them to put him into the White House. And so he said no new wars. And I think people are confused right now in the base as to why it looks like we now are in a new war in the Middle East. You hear this talking point going around that 90% of MAGA supports, this war. But that's not mathematically possible because if you look at the coalition that elected President Trump into the White House, if that was true, right, if 90% of MAGA supported this war, Nikki Haley would be in the White House right now as president. Marco Rubio would be president. I mean, the American people had a chance in 2016 to elect literally anybody else besides Donald Trump, who were all on stage in that Republican primary saying we would love war with Iran. They had a chance to do that again in 2024 by picking Nikki Haley as their candidate, but instead they picked Donald Trump. I also think if 90% of MAGA supports this, I don't think your show would be getting the views that it's getting. I don't think Megyn Kelly and Tucker Carlson's show would be getting the views that it's getting. Polling is sort of an outdated way of collecting information. They say Vietnam was the first living room war, but it looks like this is the first war in the social media age. And social media is a way for you to see in real time how the public is perceiving something. We certainly use that on the campaign, I can tell you. Social media is a more accurate representation of public sentiment. You can track it in real time versus polling. So this idea that 90% of the coalition supports that just quite literally isn't possible when you look at the wide swath of people, independents, moderates, Muslims in Dearborn, Michigan, young men who all joined President Trump's coalition specifically because they were really excited about the promise of no new wars. And I guess that would be my question to Will, though, is...
It is truly something to behold when a political movement realizes they have been totally conned. Trump ran on no new wars, and yet here we are watching his administration launch an unprovoked, illegal offensive that is already costing American lives and destabilizing the entire globe. But it's not just the American right tearing itself apart. Across the pond, international allies are scrambling to figure out how to deal with an unhinged commander-in-chief. Here is former UK Member of Parliament Rory Stewart absolutely dismantling the justification for this war, exposing Trump's diplomatic strong-arming and completely shredding the spineless response of British leadership.
Meeting that he would have absolutely done that, and Keir Starmer should have done that. Would you have done that?
I think Blair is completely wrong. Completely wrong. This is an illegal, immoral, reckless war that is going to make the world a much more dangerous place. It's already driving up the price of oil. It's destroying the security of American allies in the Gulf. It's not achieving what it set out to achieve in Iran. Anyone who thinks that this is the path to some lovely, liberal, democratic, stable regime in Iran at the moment, there's no sign of that. And of course, it's a tragedy. It's a tragedy for Britain. We've been a very strong ally of the US since the 1950s. But we cannot be in a position where the United States does not consult with us, doesn't talk to us, has no interest in our views, and then just announces it's going to drag us into the war by using our bases.
But isn't the cold, hard reality that if we get attacked, and we're vulnerable, I mean, the UK armed force has been reduced to such a degree, you could put all the army inside Wembley Stadium and have a lot of empty seats. We've been exposed, I think, with the two ships which can't even leave yet for a week or two to join the action, even if we want them to. There's a general feeling from all our armed force leaders that we are, really heavily vulnerable right now. If we were attacked, say Putin decided to have a go, the first call we would make would be to the United States, to Donald Trump. And what concerns me about this is I'm not disputing for a moment anything you say. Many people feel the same way. But this so-called special relationship, it does rely occasionally on doing things. There was a very interesting piece I read at the weekend about Margaret Thatcher when Ronald Reagan, I think it was, wanted her help. And, her every instinct and every one of her advisors said, do not help. But she slept on it overnight and went, we have to help. They're our biggest ally and they're the one that we have to help in these moments, even if our instincts tell us not to. That it actually, although it's in the short-term national interest to say we can't do this, the longer-term, bigger picture national interest of the UK is that we have to have the Americans on side. Because when we get attacked, they're the first port of call.
I mean, unfortunately, Trump has shattered that world. I mean, if we were in a world in which we felt we could rely on the US, in which we believed that he believed in protecting Europe against Russia, that he believed in NATO, that he respected European sovereignty, fine. But he's trying to create a world in which he effectively says he gets to do whatever he wants, whenever he wants, and everybody has to come along with it. And there's no quid pro quo. It would be naive to think that because you helped him out somewhere, he would ever act except in his own national interest. The only thing that Donald Trump would think about if he was asked to do something is whether it would help Donald Trump. And secondarily, maybe his idea of what the US wants. The idea that he shows loyalty, gratitude, forget it. Look at the Gulf. These people have given him airplanes, they've invested hundreds of billions, they've given him property contracts. And without consulting them, he's basically set out to destroy their economies overnight. That's what you learn. I mean, you cannot be in a position with somebody who's behaving somewhere between a bully and a gangster of saying to him, there's nothing we can do. And that was the risk, actually, we almost had with Greenland, which is you had people like Mandelson, our disgraced ambassador in the US, saying, well, maybe we just have to give him Greenland because the really big picture is Ukraine. And, you know, we're too dependent on them for defense. And this just plays into his hands because he basically thinks Europe's weak, the UK's weak, they just have to do what he says. And that world has changed. We cannot continue in that relationship because if you're in that kind of relationship, you will be abused forever.
This right here is exactly what progressives and leftists have been warning about since 2016. Donald Trump's entire anti-war posture was always a grift. It was a convenient populist talking point designed to scoop up war-weary voters while he simultaneously surrounded himself with the most bloodthirsty, hawkish neoconservatives in Washington. You don't get to run as an isolationist peacemaker and then hand the keys of the Pentagon over to the exact same political operatives who engineered the disasters in Iraq and Afghanistan. Now, we are watching the entirely predictable result. A sprawling, unwinnable conflict in the Middle East, surging global inflation from choked-off oil supplies, and a blank check written to the military-industrial complex. What makes this particular meltdown so satisfying is that the MAGA base is finally being forced to reckon with their own hypocrisy. They spent years mocking the left for warning about Trump's dangerous volatility, only to find themselves completely betrayed the second he took power. Furthermore, as Rory Stewart brilliantly pointed out, this is the death knell for American soft power. When the United States acts like a rogue state, flagrantly violating international law without congressional approval or a coherent exit strategy, it gives cover to every other authoritarian regime on the planet to do the exact same thing. The world is objectively less safe, and the exact people who voted for this mess are suddenly shocked that the leopard is eating their face. So, what do you think? What was the biggest lie Trump told his base regarding his foreign policy? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure you hit the like and subscribe buttons for more and ring that notification bell so you never miss a video. Thanks for watching.